Christian Home Crusade. Now, the first question that I that I had to every pastor I talked to was, "What in the world's a Christian Home Crusade?" And so we'd go into the long diatribe and try to explain it, and we'd go into details and try to come up with some big statistics and information of why we need to establish Christian homes and so on and so forth. And finally, after several months, we got it condensed down to this motto: revival begins at home. For instance, we all want to we want to have a revival in our church. Well, the reality is, until we have mommy and daddy reading the Bible at home to their families, we're never really going to have revival in our church. And so I believe that really helped people identify what we were trying to do by linking that. Revival begins at home. We all say we want it, but what do we need to do to make it happen? And so I'm going to go back and give you a little bit of history about how it happened. In February of 2009, we started sending a series of letters to Pastor Sexton, and we wanted to come to our church and wanted to be with us. Well, we would confirm that he was going to come in February of 2009, and I told a few of my pastor friends, and they said, "Oh, we want to bring our whole church, and we want to be involved in it." Well, after about 6 churches, our building wouldn't hold near the crowd that was coming. And so we said, well, let's just find the next biggest building we could find. And we went and we looked at convention centers. And convention centers in Portsmouth, Ohio are not the same as convention centers in Knoxville, Tennessee. Okay? And so we looked at one facility that seated 300 people and another facility that seated 450 people. And then finally, we came to the conclusion that we were just going to go whole hog and find the biggest building we could find. And so we got the Vern Rice Center for the Arts, and people started to come. We had this huge stage. And we thought, well, I went and talked to the man who's the technical director at the Vern Rice Center, and I said, what's the biggest crowd that's ever been on the stage? And he said, well, the most we've ever had at that time, I think they had 120 people was on the stage. Since then, they've had the Ohio State Marching Band. And any Buckeyes? I know we've got a few Buckeyes. Any other Buckeyes? All right, let's pray. This is over. But anyway, we had they had about 180, but they had about 120 people. It was the biggest they ever had. And I said, so we could get a nice sized choir on that stage. And so we contacted a few churches that we knew that had choirs. And at this time, we didn't have a whole lot of lead time. And so this is now coming up to February of 2010. And we said, well, let's see how many choirs we can get together. I think we ended up with 13 churches that brought their choir. And so we had, I think it was about 170 voices or so in that first choir. And at that point, we had no idea what we were doing. I want to make that very clear, okay? We had no idea what we were doing. We were just figuring it out. And I had not been a part of anything like that before in my lifetime. I hadn't even really heard of the concept of trying to get all this done. And so we just kind of figured it out. We thank God for a black curtain that separated the track that I ran, getting to the choir and to the exhibitors and things like that, back and forth. And so it came off, and it all worked out. And people immediately started asking us, when are we going to do that again? We ended up with 31 churches that came on board and said, we'd love to be a part of it. But the problem that I had with it was they came and they were only attenders. And we're going to try to make this point really strong today. If we're going to have any kind of large-scale meeting and we're going to ask people to participate, they need to be more than attenders. They have to be, for instance, you have an idea. Let's just say, I have an idea. I'm going to invent a phone you can carry around in your pocket. Okay? Well, the problem is I've got the idea, but I don't know how to build it. So I come to you, and I say, okay, you know how to build it. The problem is neither one of us have any money. Okay? And so we come over to him because we know he's got money. Okay? And so you've got the money. Now I've got, let's say, some controlling interest in the matter, and he's got some interest in it, and he's got some interest. But now he's invested. All these people are invested. And so now they really care about what the outcome of the meeting is because it's their investment. Just like nobody's more excited about a revival meeting in our church than the people who are planning it. Same way with a meeting like that. And so we were concerned that we had 31 churches, and they all came on board, and they wanted to be a part of it. And at that time, to be honest, it was Clarence Sexton that brought them there. They'd not heard him, and they said, we get a chance to hear Clarence Sexton. But then the second, we took some time off and started praying about it and asking God, and we decided to do it every other year because if you're in a situation where 90% of the people that are going to come to a meeting are all going to come from other churches, you can go to that well a little too much. And you have to spend the same amount of time going to them, trying to encourage them, trying to help them, supporting what they're doing. And so we did every other year. We talked to Pastor Sexton. We got a date confirmed. And so we started planning it. Now we've learned a few things, and we're going to try to figure it out. And so we start working, planning, and then Kevin Bartlett, they decided they wanted to have a God Bless America crusade there in Charleston, West Virginia. They said, hey, could you come on board? And we were able to be one of the steering committee's pastors to get all that together. And so we saw 9,000 people come to that meeting, and I believe there was about 45 churches there in the capital city of West Virginia. And so we learned a few more things. And nobody's got the corner on this market because nobody really knows what we've got here. Now, there was a time when the area-wide meeting was a Baptist idea. That was our thing. You know, just like now we have this, everybody's concerned about small groups. Well, you know, we invented that, non-denominational, where we invented that. We're independent Baptists. You know, all those things are core ideas. The area-wide meeting, that's something that we used to do all the time. And so it's nothing new. And so we spent some time with Brother Bartlett, and then Brother Myron Fox just had another meeting in February down in Virginia. And so we spent a lot of time comparing notes and getting back and forth. And so we started working. And so we're going to go through some of these organizing a Christian Home Crusade notes and look at it. I want to tell you, this is my book for the Christian Home Crusade, okay? It's a lot of work. Some would say it was over-planning. But I'm a firm believer that you cannot over-plan. We have every detail, cover things that never even were dealt with. We had chairs that were brought in from a furniture sales company, and they provided the chairs, and they all got hidden behind a curtain. So we never used them. Nobody ever sat in them. But we want to make sure every detail was covered, you know. And so, I mean, we have everything from, you know, the budget and all that. We'll go into that in just a little bit. I wanted to put this up on the screen because this is just some of the files that we had on this. I think we ended up with about 4,000 files in various aspects, getting ready on our laptop to get all this together, whether it be a YouTube highlight video or the audio tracks, you know, because you ask somebody to be a part of a choir, realize this, most churches don't have a choir. And if they do, it's periodic. And then they may sing something out of the hymn book, but to ask them to sing something of a major arrangement that's going to require accomplished pianists, most churches haven't done that. So we had soundtracks, and you may get nervous about that, but you know, it's like a missionary told me one time. He was teaching missions in a college. He said, I teach every missionary to play the guitar. He said, well, why would you do that? He said, because it's hard to strap a piano on your back when you're walking through the jungle. And so, you know, realize that sometimes the ministry requires certain things. So we had, I mean, from soundtracks to, we had a steering committee, some information for the college where we had the event. We had a program, and I meant to bring those, and I didn't do that, and I apologize. But we had, you know, invoices for the program art, the hymns that we used, and we'll talk more about that later. You know, we had the largest sale of Independent Baptist Friends, or Baptist Friends Sing, was for the Christian Home Crusade, Volume 1. And so we sold about 300 or so of those. You know, artwork, different things, and we'll maybe look at that if we have some more time. But let's look at this, organizing a Christian Home Crusade. A major event is something that God has to lead you to. If you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, then it's just a waste of time. A man told me, he said, are you doing this just to make a name for yourself? And he told me that the day I got the box of tickets that we had. We had 10,000 tickets printed. And I opened that box up, and Charles Keene was with us, and he looked at some of the material. And he told me, he said, Brother Brown, he said, you're the only person I know having a meeting like this that your name's not anywhere on it. And I forgot about it. I probably should have put it on there, but I never thought about it. And what I'm trying to say is, if you're doing it just to do it, just to say, look at what we've done, then I believe that's the wrong motives. You know, God has to put you in that position. And that's where we're at. Now people are asking, so you're going to do it again? People said, are you going to do it next year? And I told them no. I believe they'd want to come. But I don't have the peace of God about that, so we're doing it every other year. But, you know, planning it for the sake any other sake other than this is what God wants us to do is a bad idea. Now, you should have in a speaker you trust. You can have in somebody that has a certain name or a certain recognizability, but until you have a person you trust, they're never really going to be able to help you. Now, there are people that have an equal name that maybe is recognizable as Clarence Sexton, but here's the reality. Clarence Sexton helps me, and he spent time with me, and he walked around the farm with my dad and we looked at the horse stalls, and we threw around a bale of hay. Pastor Sexton throwing a bale of hay. That was just kind of neat. I never thought I'd experience that. We went to lunch, and he wanted to talk about cows for an hour. He didn't want to talk about the ministry and those sorts of things because he was important to me. And you need to make sure that whoever you have in is somebody that you're satisfied that they're going to encourage you, they're going to encourage your church, because your church is the focus. Now, one of my best friends in the ministry, Jimmy Reagan, he was one of our steering committee pastors, and he brought a great number of folks, and I want everything that God can do in their church when it comes down to it. Calvary Baptist Church is the church I pastor. And that's the church that you have to make sure that that person is coming in, not just to please everybody else, but that's got to be your foundation, you know. And so have somebody in you trust. It should, you know, if it's recognizable, that helps. You know, if they recognize the name, that sounds great. They may be able to be part of it. But it needs to be somebody who has a good testimony. A man told me, one of our steering committee pastors, Brother Jim Pridemore, he told me, he said, you know, one thing, he went to school with Pastor Sexton. They graduated, they were at Tennessee Temple at the same time. And Brother Pridemore told me, he said, let me tell you something about Clarence. Now, when he said Clarence, I about went vapor locked, you know, but when he said, let me tell you about Clarence. He said, every time that I'm around him, he's humble and doesn't act like he deserves anything. And that says a lot. I believe it needs to have somebody with a Christ-like testimony, somebody who's going to encourage your church. Your church should be the one that you have the focus on. And you're trying to help as many folks as you can. But when it comes down to it, your church is going to pay the bill. Your church is the one that you're going to live with. Your church is going to bring the most people. Your church is the one that's going to get most excited about it. Your church is the one that's going to be most stirred up. They're going to know what it means. They're going to have the tickets. They're going to get the slogans down. Because nobody's going to be more excited about it than you are, and they're going to be next on that list. Okay? Let's look down here. Number 3. This is important. Relationships must be built with local pastors. Now, it'll take time for you to build trust with them. And remember this. They do not owe you their participation. Don't get offended if they say no. We had well, there was a man told me, he said, brother, I don't know if we're going to be able to participate. I said, okay. He said, you want to know why? Now, you may not be wired like this, but my first response about to come out of my mouth was, not really. But, you know, because I really felt I wanted him to be there. I wanted to bring their folks because I knew it was going to help them. But they don't owe you their participation. And we're independent Baptists, and we believe that, but we are also very, very independent. And we need to be careful about territory. We need to be, you know, I pastor, you know, many of you pastor, and you know what it feels like when another church bus drives in front of your church and picks up a kid 2 blocks down the road. And they, well, you know, why couldn't we reach those people? Well, I'm glad they're getting picked up, but we can get very territorial and recognize that about folks, okay? And so, but you've got to build relationships with them. Now, one danger that you're going to have is coming to them just to expect something out of them. Okay, hi, it's nice to meet you, and I'm going to be here as long as I can and work with you until the Christian Home Crusade is over, and then carry on. It's been a pleasure. Now, you've got to build a relationship with them. The Christian Home Crusade was 5 years in the working. I was 26 years old, and I was in veterinarian school at Ohio State when God called me to preach. So all my experience was with large animals and those sorts of things. I started a series on Psalm 23 in our church from the perspective of a person who's raised sheep, learned to hate them, and ends up liking cows, okay? And so I did this, and then a man heard about it of a local Bible college. He said, well, why don't you come and do a module for that with our pastors, you know, pastoral students. I said, all right, be glad to. And so I come, and I do the session there for about 4 hours, and the moderator of a pastor's fellowship that meets about an hour, a little over an hour north of us, was there. He said, hey, brother, would you come do this at our pastor's fellowship? Would you do it every month for a year? I thought, I don't know about that. But I said, sure. But I was a little concerned. I was 26 years old talking to people about how to shepherd sheep. And I said, well, I can't tell you about how to take care of people, but I do know that when God calls a sheep, he's not being polite, okay? And so we went through that, and God put a burden in my heart because there was nobody from our area that would drive the hour and a half to a lot of these meetings. I said, well, we've got to start one here. So what we did is we started with about 4 or 5 pastors, and we just started meeting, and we had breakfast. I said, all right, now we need to take this concept and go a little further. And so we started with monthly meetings in other churches. And so if there is a local pastor's fellowship, you need to support it. And not just when you're trying to get something out of people. You need to support it. And if there's not one, you need to start one. Now, there in our county, there are 204 churches. 103 of them have Baptist in the name somewhere. We have 80,000 people. 23 of those are independent Baptist churches. They essentially have the same gospel, same Christ, same essential function, okay? Not all of them are part of the pastor's fellowship. Now, I want them to come, and I enjoy having them there, and some are more attended, some are less attended, but all the time you're building relationships with people. They have to learn to trust you before they're ever going to come to you. You know, Brother Reagan and I we missed a very good message by Raymond Barber about 7 years ago, and somebody told me, they said, hey, there's a guy here from around you. Go out and talk to him. We became very good friends. But we were friends for several years before we ever even thought about a pastor's fellowship. And then we work with a pastor's fellowship, and you know, those things start. And you build a relationship with people. But don't expect people to join you just by virtue of who you are. You've got to show them trust. You've got to show that you care about them. You know, I mean, if you never were polite to your wife, why would you ever expect her to be polite to you? You know? And so, same kind of relationship. But work to faithfully support it. Host a meeting from time to time if there is an established fellowship. Go for a while. Host a meeting. And don't expect to preach. Sometimes we preachers, you know, if we're participating, we say, all right, you know, I'll come. Do I get to preach? Well, I try to never preach at the Southern Ohio Pastors Fellowship. Now, I preached in February, and kind of leading up to the Christian Home Crusade, and I said a few things about the 80K project, something I'll say a word about in a little bit. I spoke about that in March, but I don't think I'd preached one other time in the 5 years. Don't expect to preach, because you're going to have enough time if you're going to start something like this, where people, for a long time, they call it the Ryan Brown Pastors Fellowship, or they call it the Ryan Brown Family Conference, you know. And I said, we've got to get rid of that stuff, because if it's attached to your name, you're going to have, you know, some responsibility to it, but at the same time, you don't want it to be that way. You want it to be God's work, right? Good. Number 4, make sure that pastors you hope to sponsor are given ample notice of the meeting. Now, I have right now a 2015 calendar I'm working on. Is anybody else crazy like that? Okay, nobody else. Anybody working on 2013? Okay, I've got 2014 all completely planned. Now, that's a little crazy for some folks. I understand that. But, you know, one guy told me, he said, I don't even know who's preaching our revival. I know we're going to have it, but I'll figure that out. And I said, well, when is it? He said, it's in, 6 weeks. And I said, well, let me know if you need somebody, you know. And, some people don't plan, some people do, but you're going to have to give them notice well in advance. And for something like this, you need to tell them what's going on, I believe, at least a year in advance. Get it on their calendar, because we have a church calendar, and you do too. Now, there are certain things that you may not be working on right now, but you know you have mission conference this time, you have vacation Bible school at this time, you have a revival at this time, and there are certain things kind of built into your thinking, you know what's going to happen. Well, they need to be able to build that in. For instance, February, everybody has Valentine banquets and sweetheart banquets and things like that. So we let people know well ahead of time, and so they made their Valentine banquet the Christian Home Crusade. And so they didn't do 2 things, they did 1 thing. And so give people ample notice. Establish a title in the initial literature that gives what the purpose of the meeting is. They're going to ask you, what is a Christian home crusade? I did a radio interview, and a man asked me, he said, now, why would you use the word crusade? He said, well, I can't believe you'd use that because it denotes so much that went on with the Crusades in the Bible lands. I said, well, number one, that was 1,000 years ago. Number two, that was the Roman Catholics, and I said the one thing they could agree on to do with us was the same thing they did to the Muslims, as Baptists. And I said, furthermore, it helps understand what our mission is. What is our mission? We have a crusade. We've got a problem with the breakdown in the home. We know that we've got a problem in church. Well, we're not going to fix church until we fix the home. The two cannot be separated. Just like revival and evangelism, the two cannot be separated, no matter how hard you try. You cannot separate them. I don't believe you can separate revival and God's work in the home. Okay? And so, but let people know ahead of time, get it on their schedule, get them talking about it, get them thinking about it. And then after that, develop a key group, or we call it a steering committee. And do you have that box there? Could you get out one of those tickets, please, and hand those to everybody? I think we should have enough. Brother Reagan, maybe if you could help him with that. Daryl, if you could. But I'm going to give you one of these tickets. But it has an idea of what we were doing. But we had a steering committee. It's in that packet of information there as well. Maybe if you look at that, if you would, the Civic Support Guide. Open that up on the inside. This is the material that we sent to all of our civic leaders. We had a pastor's packet. We had a civic leaders packet. We had a community leaders packet. So for businesses, things like that. But on the inside of that, you see a meeting overview, general schedule. Thursday was there at the church. Friday, there on the Shawnee State campus. Then we sell the vision for the event there on page 2. Revival, cooperation, motivation. Now, I will tell you this. Cooperation is a curse word. I found that. It's almost like saying the word friendship. Friendship is bad. And so is cooperation. So I did not say a community choir or a cooperative choir. I said the word collaborative choir. Now, it's saying the exact same thing, but apparently people didn't have a problem with that. So figure out what words people have a problem with and don't use them. Here, motivation, momentum, salvation, instruction, challenge, strength, and just put those words out there. Put some key features of the event. You can look at that on your own. But turn to that third page there where it has the organizational structure. Organizational structure of the meeting. This was, I believe, very important. It was something that we did not have the first Christian home crusade that we did. We planned the whole thing. And it was too much of it was our church. So we want to get other people involved. And so we developed an organizational structure. And what we did is we found some people that had shown a great interest in the first one, okay? And so we had this steering committee of pastors. Also, we did not want to get too many pastors concentrated in one specific area. We wanted to get them spread out. We had, of course, myself. I was there right in Portsmouth, Ohio. Aaron Childers at Solid Baptist. He was 45 minutes the other direction in another county. Kevin Gullion, he was half an hour the other direction. Jimmy Reagan, about 6 years the other direction in West Union. And then Jim Pridemore, a pastor in Kentucky. And so we got a spread of pastors. Now, we had many friends that were right there local, but we're also trying to do an area-wide meeting. And so we got those people involved. We got them involved early. And you'll need to do that. They're going to help you make decisions. Now, anybody who thinks that having counselors is a bad idea is missing out because they really, really helped us on some things. Now, I'll say a little bit more about this later, but these men were given great responsibility in this meeting. You know what that shows? I believe it shows trust. We had a teen crusade, and Pastor Aaron Childers led it. Guess what? I walked in. I was there for 4 minutes. It was in another building. We did 3 crusades at one time in 3 different locations. And he ran it. I steered it. But I had to be able to trust that he was going to take care of it. Now, you may not have that many people that you can do that with. You may only have 3. But this is a key group of people. Develop a steering committee of pastors. Let them be invested in the meeting like we talked about earlier. And let them be entrusted with responsibilities, trusted for counsel. And don't disregard them. Let their opinions matter. Let their directions matter. Don't disregard them. If we're not careful, we can say, well, this is my idea. And now when it comes down to it, I was technically running the thing. But listen, God gave you these friends to be a counselor to you. Iron sharpeneth iron. That's in the Bible somewhere, isn't it? And so they could be a real help to you. Let's go back to this next page on this organizational flyer if we can. General organizational ideas. Now, again, we don't know. Nobody's got the corner on this market. You can change this thing up however you want to. But here's what I'd like to see done. I'd like to see it happen. It doesn't have to be exactly. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But this area-wide meeting with a purpose, I just like to see it happen again. And so whatever you want to do with it. But just some ideas that we've done. Prepare a budget. Now, there are three things that are inspired in most churches. Number one is the Bible. Number two is the Constitution. And number three is the budget. Now, hopefully you were able to get away from 2 and 3 being inspired, but they're pretty important. Now, it's going to be a help because it's going to guide. It's going to guide, especially when you're asking people to support. For instance, when we want, you pastor a church? What church do you pastor? Fair Park Baptist. Okay, so we want Fair Park Baptist to come and support it, and we're going to ask them to receive an offering. I think they should know what they're giving to, don't you? I think they should have an idea. What are we going to do with surplus funds if we have extra? Well, we agreed with that right at the beginning. I said, this is kind of what I think. Tell me what you guys think, and we're going to be building basketball courts in India. It's a novel idea. And so, but with Dr. P.D. Cherian. But I said, any surplus funds, I don't want them going into the Calvary Baptist Church coffers. And I wanted to make that clear up front. I don't want people giving an offering to us. Now, to be honest, I think the entire offering, if I were to take myself out hourly and just bill out at $5 an hour, I think the entire offering, all $13,000 could have probably gone to me for the work that went into it. I understand that. But I don't want people to do that. I want people to know they're giving to something. So develop a budget, get a plan for financing. What we did, we had a third of it came from church support. We had churches, they did things like Christian Home Crusade Sunday, a monthly offering. We did set a base. We said if every church could give $250, that'd be great. We didn't require that for them to come, but we just kind of had an idea, the budgetary commitment, whatever. Church support. Then we had community support. This is something you're going to have to be settled on in your own mind. Don't do it just because it's kind of what you're supposed to do. You have to be at peace with this. We had community support. We had a program, and in that program, we had pages where people had advertising, okay? And so we had, there you go. Bob and Floyd's Tire. They got a free plug on YouTube right now. They supported it. Now, we didn't have a problem. Now, we're also not going to have the Party Connection and the beer and wine outlet. You got to pick and choose this thing. So we tried to find Christian businesses, people we work with. And so, but you're going to have to be settled in your own mind, okay? Now, also at the same time, if I decide to do it, don't pick on me because I did, okay? But you're going to have to be settled in your own mind about how you're okay with that. Talk to your church leaders about it. And then we had offerings at the practices and events. We had 2 pre-conference practices and planning meetings where we had a children's choir and adult choir that were both collaborative choirs. And so we had 2 of those meetings. We also, at that time, had ushers meetings, and we had personal worker meetings. And so at those times, we had an offering. And then we had offerings the nights of the events and so on and so forth. Well, it was, and by the way, if God leads you to this, God will take care of it, I promise you. The budget for our meeting was $13,000, okay? And there are many that are much more expensive than that, but it was $13,000. God provided $13,065, okay? So, listen, God will take care of that. God will take care of it. Don't worry about it. And $13,000 to us was about like, they were talking about $100,000 for here last night. And $13,000 was about the same. It was money that we did not have, okay? And so God met that need. And don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. If you let yourself fret over money, then you're going to spend all your life fretting. All your life fretting. And you just can't let it happen. Okay, number 2 here, organize a crusade choir made up of the sponsoring churches. This is what we found, this will be the engine that drives church support. Now, most of us lead our churches through the choir. If we have a workers' meeting, here's the way it works at Calvary. We have a workers' meeting. We finish choir practice at 5:30. All the choir comes down to the workers' meeting. You know, that's just kind of the way it works, and that's the way most churches are. And so what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to organize a choir, because that's going to get the rest of the church on board. And people love to sing together. We had, I don't know how many people we had, 150, 200 voices this time around, and they loved singing together. We did a professional recording of it, and we finally got the mix of it the other day, and we're going to make sure every church gets a copy of it. But that choir will get people involved. We have a children's choir. Now, the children, we did all Bible songs. We did Bible truth music. They're Bible songs for kids. That's an excellent resource. We did that. Well, one thing that you and I have all found about children is children never come by themselves. When children sing on the stage at the Vern Rife Center, guess who they bring? They bring mom, and they bring dad, and they bring grandma, and they bring grandpa, and they bring aunts and uncles, and they may even bring their school teacher. You don't know who they're going to bring, but they're going to bring somebody with them. Children are always going to be a blessing, always. And our kids sang out, and don't get upset if some kid is that you have that one beautiful sound of the kids choir, and they've worked so hard, and there's one kid singing, "I will sing unto the Lord." Don't bother about it. That's precious. That's precious. You know, I walk into that same boy that did that on our recording, and so I walk in and I see him Sunday, and he's got his little tie sideways and his shirt untucked, and I walk up and give him a hug, and I thank God for him. And that's a good experience, and I wanted to be able to listen to that CD. And when he gets married and I perform his wedding ceremony, guess what? I'm going to play that before the service and say, "This is what you did." You can hold that over his head. But a choir will be a essential tool to help drive that, because churches are going to get involved. You're going to lead churches through the choir, and that'll be a great meeting. Now, be careful about your song selection. I will say that, but be careful about your song selection, because when you get a big group together, if you're anything like me, you're going to want to do something that only a big group can do. Realize this, that a lot of the people that are going to be in the choir are not in a church choir. And so we had one song that we wanted to do, and I realized that some choirs were dropping out because they're thinking, "I'll never be able to learn that." And so we said, all right, just forget it. Pick your song selection. Doesn't have to be grand and amazing. The fact that you're going to have a large group up there is grand and amazing enough, okay? And that's exciting for them. So be very smart about your song selection. We live in an area where if we played "I Fly Away" in a different arrangement every service, our people would just think it was the greatest thing in the world, okay? And so that may be the kind of area you live in. Well, we had to have some sort of gospel-sounding song, no matter how hard I want to do something else. You know why? Because that's what they want to hear. Now, I'm not talking about compromising your principles, but they want to hear, "I can tell the world I'm going up yonder." They want to hear that stuff. So figure out what's going to work and what's going to be effective, okay? Number 3, advertising for the meeting will be essential. Pastor Sexton checked into the hotel at the Holiday Inn down by the place where we were speaking. He checked in, walked up to the counter, and they said, "Are you here for that big Baptist meeting?" He said, "Well, yes, I am." And he said, "We hear it all over the radio." You know what? They need to know about it. Your community, even if they don't come, if they know it's going on, they're going to know that God is at work. And that's a good testimony to have. The advertising is going to be essential. There's some ideas. Radio spots. And this is one thing we've learned in our radio ministry, is that anything over about a minute, nobody listens to. So we do a daily radio broadcast on 52 radio stations of 1 minute, okay? And that's what people listen to. I had my son. He's 8 years old. I had him get on there and do a little broadcast. Well, guess what? People listen to a kid all day long. They hear me, and they're an adult, whatever. They hear adults, but a little kid gets on there. "I'd like to invite you to the Christian Home Crusade." Well, hey, listen, they love it, so don't have a problem doing it. But also, if you have a community calendar where you can get it on there, do live radio interviews. We have a couple shows. I was on a live radio program, and they said, "Hey, could you host it?" And I said, "Yes, I'd be glad to." And so every 5 minutes, they heard a spot about the Christian Home Crusade, And so take advantage of those things. I got to move along. Large-scale ticket distribution. You have those tickets there in your hand. Now, they don't have to have that to get in. Our goal is to make it free. So anybody showed up to the door, they didn't have to pay anything. They could participate in the offering. But here's my recommendation. Get 10 times the tickets that there is seating capacity in the building you're trying to fill. We had 1,100 seats, 1,200 seats in the building. We printed over 10,000 tickets. We had 400 left. So if nothing else, you're getting people involved in evangelism and inviting people that, because they know, hey, listen, we got to get rid of these things. It's not like those tracts that are sacred that we're not allowed to give out, in the back, and that's got the gospel in it. We don't want to waste it on anybody. These are tickets. You can waste them on everybody. Let them know that. Give them to everybody. We had display cases, and we laid them out in every business, every community sponsor. They said, all right, lay out a stack of them and tell them free to the public. Do that. Posters and brochures to churches. Tickets will work as far as giving them out to individuals, but you know how church is. They want to see a poster. We also sent people the artwork and let them. Some people scroll announcements, things like that. We had several churches scrolling announcements and letting those things roll. That'll be a help to you, okay? Advertising the key advertising will be sponsoring churches, though. We did billboards, we did big banners, we did tickets, we did posters, we did all those things. But the key advertising is going to be local churches. It means you got to get them on board. Now, your main advertising is going to be the last month before the meeting, where you're going to get into radio and all those sorts of things. But with churches, you're going to need them on board 4 or 5 months ahead of time. Well, guess what? They're going to start inviting their friends. They're going to get engaged in the whole process. And so that's going to be your key. You've got to build those relationships. Reach out to community leaders. Let me tell you, folks, we had our mayor and city auditor at the Christian Home Crusade, and our folks loved it. The people there thought it was just so amazing. Our mayor was here, and he was in a battle over marriage and trying to stand for a Bible definition for marriage. And hey, the mayor's here. Great to have you. He's standing for the Word of God. Stand with him. He's not exactly the same doctrinally I am, but he's a whole lot closer than the guys that are trying to change doctrinal or the idea of what marriage is and those sorts of things. And I'm glad he's taking a stand. Try to get those civic leaders there. We invited every judge. We invited every community leader we could possibly get. We reached out there. Social networking, you can fight over that all you want to. I personally can't stand the stuff, but I still exist on there every now and again. I go on YouTube or Facebook and find out where our people were Sunday, and I don't like that. So, but use social networking the best you can, digital images. Also, one thing you need to get into, develop appropriate procedures. You need to have an usher's guide. We had a 2-page usher's guide. I can get that to you. We had offering control procedures. You need to develop those things. You need to think it through. Because remember, this isn't just your church where you've got your deacon and treasurer and trustee go back and count the money, and they do it every Sunday. And then while they're going to Kentucky Fried Chicken, they drop it off at the night depository at the bank. And it's not the same kind of thing, okay? Get on board with proper procedures and those sorts of things. Now, we're about out of time. I want you to go over here to this other page real quick, and I got to quit. The individual group crusades. I want to say just a word about that, and we'll go. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to stay around and have my wife answer them for you. But we did do 3 individual group crusades. And so I'm just going to pass over it real quick. We had a children's crusade, and we brought in a man by the name of Keith Matheny. He did magic tricks, those sorts of things. Brother Reagan led that crusade. He took care of fighting with the guy trying to get the microphone turned on. And he took care of it. He organized it, but that was his baby, okay? But we had another crusade for the children. We had a teen crusade. We brought in Ryan Massey. He was a teen speaker. And, of course, this whoever you want to do on that. But we had a teen crusade. Brother Aaron Childers led that area, okay? And so we ran these 3 crusades. My assistant and I, we ran the home crusade. That was where Pastor Sexton was speaking. And so that's just an idea, these individual group crusades. You can do whatever you want to with it. I will tell you this. 3 crusades at one time is borderline crazy, okay? But it was a lot of fun, and it really made for good memories. And I was so blessed to see people get invested in this whole process. And it was theirs. And they came out, and, at 12:15, I got the text message report on the Teen Crusade. And I wasn't home yet, But I was so thrilled that somebody was up at 12:15 and they were excited about it. And just getting people excited about the work of God, we introduced a thing called the 80K Project, and we'll have those brochures that I just want you to take one of them. 80K Project, there are 80,000 people in Scioto County. You're going to need to ask yourselves, why are we having this meeting? There are 80,000 people in Scioto County. What we're trying to do is coordinate all the churches in our county to get every house, every home, the gospel by the end of 2012. Then we're trying to find a key pastor in each county surrounding us. That's 330,000 people we're trying to get the gospel to by the end of 2012. Okay? And so you can take that principle and apply it to yourself. A man the other day was going to Delaware, and he said, hey, can I have this? And he took it and went with it. Please do. Listen, God's on the side of people who want to give people the gospel. And so we don't have the niche on it. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Ask Brother Reagan. He was in on all of it, you know, and he could tell you. Okay? But we got to move on. Make sure you get one of those flyers from Brother Darrell Cardwell. All right? Let's pray. Lord, we love you, and I do thank you so much for these dear folks. I thank you for the interest they showed. And, Lord, I pray that we can come out of here and do something beyond ourselves, maybe. Well, we've got a lot of what man can do. I pray we can get a little bit of what God can do. Lord, we heard about that this morning, didn't we? Lord, it sure be nice to see revival in our day. I think this is evidence of revival. Find this room full. Lord, I expected 2 or 3 people. Lord, I'm grateful that you sent them. I'm grateful that you love us enough to use us and allow us in the ministry. And Lord, I want you to know that we love you in return. We love you for what you've done, but Lord, we love you for what you continue to do and how you involve us. Lord, I thank you for these dear folks. I pray that you'll use them in thy work in Jesus' name. Amen. Folks, God bless you. Do thank you for coming.